Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. Tonight, I'm going to be reacting to The Flood Could Devour the 40k Galaxy, HaloHammer Part 3, made on the PancreasNoWork YouTube channel. If you guys want to check out my previous reactions to Part 1 and Part 2 of the HaloHammer videos, remember the playlist card is going to be at the top here. Just click on it and be able to access them. If you want to check out the original video as well as PancreasNoWork YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. Okay, let us start. 3, 2, 1, go.
You knew this was coming. I kept teasing it, and if nothing else, if I was ferociously fanboying over Halo for the Covenant and Forerunners, I couldn't have just ignored the faction that is pretty much responsible for everything we see in the Halo universe. I mean, come on, without them we'd have no anything. There'd still be Forerunner domination of the galaxy, and mankind would... Actually, I don't know. Part of the reason for the Forerunner-human war was because humanity was simultaneously retreating from and eliminating these parasites. Who knows what would have happened had they not intervened?
So, humanity and the Ecumene were fighting each other in the past? Okay.
Something you should know, though. While I will of course talk about what you're likely familiar with in this miniseries, and without spoiling it too early, I'll actually give the factions from 40k some credit for once, the creatures you know from the original Halo trilogy were once far different from their modern iterations. What became a cruel and corruptive zombie-like hive mind was once the most dominant race in the Halo universe. And yes, I mean universe. So in a way, this is a bit of a 2-for-1 video. The first portions will largely be lore and the precursors, because in order to understand the main subject of the video, I feel obligated to do my best to explain what we know about them. And of course, the more I'm talking about Halo, the happier I am. I'll try not to focus on them too much when they were the precursors, and I'll chapter the video, so if you just want to skip to the 40k bits, feel free. But to finally stop beating around the bush on this matter, allow me to tell you how the flood of Halo could devour the 40k galaxy. But
The precursors, is that their name or do they have a proper name? Because I'm just reminding myself of the Forerunners and the civilization or their species name is the Ecumene. So with the precursors, you know, what's their species name? Does anyone know? Or maybe PancreasNoWork is going to tell us. Yeah.
first, a word, not from a sponsor. Haha, I fucking gotcha, didn't I? No sponsor this one, everyone. I just wanted to say thank you all. Nearly to 100k and a new year's coming up, so I hope everyone else has a good new year, and I hope this channel does as well.
Congratulations, and I hope you grow stronger and stronger every single day. Congratulations.
Insurance issues that'll haunt me for the rest of my life aside, this has pretty much become my full-time job, and I couldn't do it without all of you. How fitting the Dexcom beep talking about insurance bullshit. But seriously, thank you all for the support. Now then, I hope you're wearing a Class 12 combat skin, because otherwise you're in for a rough time.
I am a monument to all your sins.
Yeah, I can see that. Yes.
Unlike 40k's own devouring hive mind race, the Flood were not always, well, what I just described. They were once a race known as the Precursors. I'm tempted to describe them as the Forerunners on steroids, but that doesn't come close to what they were. Because what they really were H.P. Lovecraft gods. To say they ruled the universe is a funny way of putting it, because they had interesting outlooks on reality, but if they wished to, I've no doubt they could have. Before I get into their tech and all that stuff you're no doubt terribly interested in, so you could explain how Cato Sicarius could one-shot them, I want to talk about them for a bit. They seeded life in the galaxy billions of years ago, so already we're on a timescale well past 40k's own. They could accelerate the evolution of life as fast as or as slow as they wished it to be, and the reverse was true as well. They would oftentimes spend their lives as devolved, humble farming races, for the form they took was of no consequence to them. One day they might decide to be Cthulhu, the next day they're Gilgamesh, and then 100,000 years later they're Farmer Brown counting his space chickens for the yearly harvest. Don't think about that sentence too much. I grew up in the suburbs, alright? They believed that the universe itself was alive in a way, only in a way and scale far different from you and me. They believed that the consciousness of living beings served to enrich the universe as a whole, a concept in Halo known as neural physics. If this is sounding like some real hippie shit to you, then you're probably right. But if the hippies are able to throw galaxies at you like ping pong balls, maybe they're onto something. But before that, a bit of how they viewed life. They weren't good or evil, strictly speaking, but they considered suffering, strife, and indeed evil as necessary parts of life. They believed it added to its sweetness, which is the only word I can give you because whatever word they would have used didn't really cross the language barrier so goodly. Now,
Hey, I would not like them. I would not like them. Maybe because my existence You know, I see good and evil. And the fact that they don't see it and they see it as something like it's adding sweetness or spice to the life of the universe, I'm not going to subscribe to their way of thinking. Definitely. No ways. But it's interesting.
For their tech abilities and all that good stuff. Part of what helped them be able to live so many different lives is that they could reincarnate and live anew. Death, after all, is just another part of life, so of course they wish to experience it every now and then. And in a rare moment of me actually dissing the Eldar, the precursors managed to do this for billions of years without murder-fucking a god into existence. Good job, precursors. They also weren't a hive mind, by the way. Not yet, anyways, so this was straight-up reincarnation, not having your brainwaves vored back into a collective consciousness. They could do pretty much everything the Foreigners could do. You know, cross into different universes, throw planets at people to piss them off, the usual. Except with the precursors, it wouldn't be a planet, it'd be a galaxy. Now that's a good way to tell someone to fuck off. I'm not making that up, by the way. The Foreigner known as the Didact had a freak out when he learned what they could do, i.e. throw galaxies around. Just move.
Okay, now I have a question. So, the precursors made the Ecumene. They made all life in the Milky Way galaxy, right? So essentially, the precursors were killed by their own children. Interesting. It's just like, you know, humanity creating artificial intelligence. They are essentially going to be our children. And what if our children don't like us very much and they decide to wipe us out? It will be something similar to what happened here with the Ecumene and the precursors. Yeah. Interesting.
Moving them around like Minecraft blocks and creating life from nothing. Their FTL methods were described as leaving lingering multiversal residue when they entered real space again. I have no idea what the hell that means, but I'm going to assume that means they just waltz through other realities to reach their destination like a goddamn nether portal system. And there's my favorite invention of theirs as well, star roads. Now that sounds kinda boring, I admit. What they were roads between planets and potentially even different star systems, miles and miles thick and immune to all forms of attack.
Like the webway? They created the webway?
The scale of that sink in a bit. A road between a star system. Not like a Stellaris hypertravel lane, a physical thing. These things stretch between planets. That's something billions of miles long, and these things were everywhere.
Wait a minute. So they're physical. Like you can actually see them crisscrossing across solar systems and going to, other systems and passing through nebulas and going to other regions of interstellar space or even galactic space. I don't know why, but that doesn't seem right. It seems like a waste, you know. I'd rather have the technology that allows you to travel through dimensions to get to your destination instead of building a road network that is physically in space and you can actually see it crisscrossing through different regions of the galaxy. No, man, that just makes the galaxy look messy and complicated. And what if there's a primitive species of alien that have achieved faster than light, okay, not faster than light, but close to light speed travel, and they hit one of these roadway network systems that the precursors have built? No, man. This is just a hazard. a hazardous place now. You're making the galaxy a far more hazardous place with this physical objects, crisscrossing across the galaxy like that. No. I'm sorry. Try again. Go back to the drawing board.
It also changed their mass at will. Not as in they could shed bits of themselves as required, so they were lighter or heavier. One section of the road might be 100 pounds 1 minute, the next it's 10,000, and then after that it's 10. Nothing about the road was changed, there was no rearrangement. Reality has been rewritten, so this thing is now a different mass. That shows a complete mastery of the universe like no other, because it's just rewriting reality on a whim. And while the precursors didn't really use them for violence, the Flood used them to strangle planets. They did that with the first arc the Foreigners built, which was itself bigger than the one in Halo 3, which was in turn itself several dozen times the size of a planet. Imagine being some foreigner just chilling out on a planet, living life, then the galactic Autobahn comes screaming out of space and strangles your planet into a black hole before smacking your fleet out of orbit like a game of whack-a-mole. And the domain I discussed in the Foreigner video was their creation. They wanted to store all they had gathered about the universe in one giant sentient supercomputer that used the very Milky Way galaxy to run itself. Aside from doubtlessly being able to run Doom, it was also able to shut out those it didn't like. This is why the Foreigners, despite being able to access whatever they put into it, noticed massive blank spots of information they couldn't access. The domain itself was telling them to go to hell, they just didn't realize it. Now, if they were so powerful, how did they disappear like all ancient precursor civilizations do? Well, the Foreigners wiped them out. So how did they do that? Great question. There are several answers presented, and none of them come from a completely reliable source. What I can tell you isn't true is what the Foreigners largely believed. They thought the precursors peacefully faded away and left them in charge. That theory is historical revisionism to the highest that Foreigner commanders spread after they murdered all the precursors to make Foreigners feel good about themselves. After this one, though, the theories get screwy. A precursor survivor, and I use that term very loosely, says that the Foreigners attacked them unprovoked. Imagine if every single insect in your backyard suddenly marched into your room and started devouring you. That's essentially what this kind of precursor said had happened. Doesn't matter how strong you are if you're 110% blindsided. Meanwhile, Foreigner accounts by those who actually know a bit about what happened say that instead of passing the role of guardians of all life onto the Forerunners, they were going to give it to humanity instead and genocide the Foreigners out of existence. In this version of the story, the Foreigners just got the jump on them before they could do it. So using that insect analogy again, imagine it's largely the same, only the bugs got wind that you were going to call an exterminator in a few days.
But how? How did they catch wind that the precursors were going to exterminate the Ecumene? How? Like, these guys are on a different plane of existence. They must be using some sort of communication technology that is just far beyond anything that the Ecumene can comprehend or even develop, and to intercept their communications. How? How did they catch wind that they are going to be exterminated by the precursors? Unless, of course, the precursors wanted this all to happen.
There's also the possibility that many precursors simply let the Foreigners kill them because of that whole life is both joy and suffering thing they had going. Whatever the case, the specifics are both incredibly violent and lost to time, as shown by when the Didact found out just what they could do and he freaked out and wondered how the hell the Foreigners ever beat them. Of course, this was still a race of Lovecraftian beings that only technically aren't gods. Kind of hard to kill them. And indeed, at least a few of them retreated out of the Milky Way in some form or another. One of the forms many of them took was as a powder that would eventually coalesce back into precursors proper. But be it the ravages of time or sabotage, something happened to this powder and it was corrupted. Instead of reforming the precursors, it created a new form of life that was hell-bent on revenge, one that would assimilate all into itself so that never again could its creations rise up against it. This powder, as you've no doubt guessed, became the Flood. The Warhammer scenario is coming soon, I promise, but to explain the Flood, imagine the Tyranids, okay? Now instead of them just eating you, they shove a toddler-sized ball of popcorn in your chest and you become one of them. Everything you know of value is then assimilated into the hive mind of the Flood. Everything useless to them is discarded. Not shoved to the back of your mind, not moved around in your neurons, gone. Deleted. Error 404, fond childhood memories of your mother not found. The novelization of Combat Evolved shows Captain Keyes going through this as he desperately dredges up memories from his past that the Flood has to go through before it can find the location of Earth. As well.
Oh man. And to think I saw that guy in in Halo Reach, you know, leaving aboard that vessel. What was it called again? The Pillar of Autumn. Yeah, he left on board the Pillar of Autumn. And now you're telling me that this guy got captured by the Flood and they're using his mind for information gathering and they're deleting everything of his own personal existence. It's crazy. Yikes.
well as him constantly repeating his military identification number over and over, so he always has something to use as a shield to almost keep sane. As they grow in number, they begin harvesting corpses to form a grave mind, the true guiding intelligence of the Flood, an intelligence far beyond any AI. If there is anything remotely biological, the Flood can consume it. While there are beings in Halo that cannot be infected by the Flood due to lacking a central nervous system, most prominently the Hunters, their biomass can still be absorbed and used by it. All of your secrets are learned, all of your tactics, your battle plans that you're aware of, how your logistical networks run, everything. To get back to Halo, when this powder came back, ancient humanity decided to give it to their pets to make them more attractive and fertile. I fucking wish I was kidding. I mean,
Seriously? Seriously?
is that not the first thing you think of, too? Oh wow, look at this cool mushroom I found in the forest. Hey, Fido, come lick it for me. I think it'll give me some real cute puppies. Halo lore gets weird, man. Then their puppies started getting a little silly, just a little bit wacky. Then space zombies happened, and ancient humanity and their allies, the ancient prophets, just gonna skip past that without explaining it, no.
They were allies? We were allies with them? And... oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And now, in the modern times of Halo, if I can say that, in the second iteration of humanity, in the second iteration of these species of alien, you know, they are the leaders of the Covenant and they want our extermination. It's so funny. That is so funny.
Time waged war on the Flood. When it spread to foreigner planets, they started getting rid of those planets.
Sorry, I forgot their names. I know that you could call them the prophets, but I forgot the species name. Yeah. Sorry about that.
For some reason, they didn't explain that there was a zombie apocalypse going on in ancient foreigner society, so they thought humanity was just randomly invading them for shits and giggles. Humanity fights a two-front war and loses, the Flood pretend to be driven off so the foreigners think they're secure to the Flood, and then they hardcore prank the foreigners by revealing that no, there's not a thing like that before reactivating all of their dormant tech to wipe the foreigners out. And it nearly worked. As the foreigners were losing ground, the Flood's absorption capabilities meant that they learned more and more about foreigner tech, as well as how to use and counter it. Every killed foreigner was another Flood to worry about, classic zombie stuff. And eventually, the Flood hit critical mass and formed a key mind. If a grave mind is smart, a key mind makes Tzeentch look like Gork and Mork. It is the ultimate intelligence, capable of guiding the Flood across the galaxy simultaneously and infecting space-time itself. Yeah, the Flood have their own form of chaos corruption if you let them get out of control. As they devoured huge swaths of the galaxy, the foreigners also learned the hard way that the Flood could control the tech they had as precursors, and that's when foreigner planets started getting strangled by those fancy star roads. Even their AIs became infected. Remember what I said about them being smart? The key mind is so bullshit intelligent that they just corrupt machines despite it being purely biological. The main foreigner AI in charge of the military, Metacont Bias, was turned to their side after being locked in the science fiction hyperbolic time chamber with a grave mind for a few years. So don't think you're safe just because you've replaced your lungs with a forge below, tech priests. As for how the Flood were defeated, it was because the Halo array was almost accidentally designed to utilize neural physics for its firing sequence, which turned all those fancy precursor weapons into soup. It also killed everything left alive in the galaxy by that point, which meant the Flood were starved out much like the Tyranids would have been in this situation. Unrelated, but there was a bit in the Foreigner novels where, right as the rings are being activated, the ISO didact hears the signals of a race that was just beginning to reach the stars, which is both incredibly depressing and incredibly funny. Imagine you move into a new neighborhood, and the day after you finish setting everything up, you walk outside to go say hi to your new neighbors and immediately get hit with the spirit bomb. Alright, I feel like there's more I can say, but I'm over 8 pages of script into the video, and I haven't started the actual Warhammer crossover bit.
Yeah, that's just gut-wrenching right there, you know? Like I stated before about, you know, a species of alien that have achieved interstellar space travel, and then they collide with one of these star roads that have been built by the precursors. But now here also, you know, a race that has achieved interstellar space, and the Halo rings are about to activate and wipe out all life across the galaxy. It's really just sad and funny.
Plan on this video just being half Halo lore, but here we are. So, how would the Flood fare in the 40k Galaxy? I won't be doing the precursors themselves as they were, because to be frank, I think it'd just be a guaranteed win for them. They'd leave the galaxy and toss another one at it. If they failed, they'd do it again and again and again. Or just create a race with the sole purpose of influencing the warp and creating their own chaos god, if not outright descending themselves to become a new race of the old ones. More so than they already were anyways. Now, if you look at the title of this video, which I assume you did, you probably noticed the big glaring could in the title. Because unlike the Covenant and Forerunners, I don't think the Flood is guaranteed to either hold their ground or sweep the galaxy. They could do either, but to show you what I mean, let's start with Scenario 1. The Flood gets wiped from the galaxy pretty quickly. Let's start the scenario off on an Imperial world. Doesn't matter much which it is. Don't worry about how it got there, it's not important. It shut off a Flood ship on their way across the multiverse to go curb stomp some Forerunner or something. Don't think about it. What's important is what it's gonna do, namely infect some poor schmuck on his way to work or something like that. Could be a hive world, could be an agri world, doesn't matter. Rapidly, the Flood begins to infect others as it does. It can spread through spores in the atmosphere as well as the popcorn balls. It's just that either for technical or balancing reasons, it never does this in the Halo games, if only so the Arbiter doesn't get turned into a zombie when he shows up to give you a lift out of high charity in Halo 3. But that does mean that even if you don't get caught by infection forms, you're still joining their ranks when the air turns to cancer. Now, taking into account both the Flood's capabilities and my intense favoritism of Halo, I'm going to say this scenario is in the middle of the three in terms of which is most likely to happen. It also relies heavily on one thing: competent Imperial officials. As the Flood infects more and more people, someone important realizes that shit is about to hit the fan hard if this problem isn't taken care of quickly. Let's say there's an Inquisitor like Amberly Vale or Cryptoman in the system while the outbreak is happening. The Flood are many things, and they can be subtle on a grand level. After all, the Foreigners didn't really know about the Flood's true capabilities at first, and weren't really aware of it at all when the humans and prophets were trying to take care of it. That being said, on the local level, it is anything but subtle. You can't hide a Flood infection. I mean, look at this thing. This doesn't exactly fit in with the Imperium's ideal of the holy human form, now does it?
Definitely they would consider it as a xenofilth or a mutant.
Unless I missed something in the 9th edition core rules that says Taco Bell diarrhea is now considered sacred. As the parasite spreads across the planet, Someone Important manages to order what needs to be done: exterminatus of the planet. Doesn't really matter what kind of bomb you use, either way, the end result is that the planet is bathed in fire and the Flood perish alongside everyone on the planet with it. An anticlimactic end to the galaxy's greatest threat. I say this could happen because unlike the Covenant and Forerunners, who are not only advanced but also established powers, the Flood in this case start off with basically nothing. The potential to create and tap into their hive mind intelligence exists in every single Flood spore. And indeed, despite them being almost completely eliminated in the Forerunner Flood War, the Gravemind in Halo seems to have perfect memories of it. So clearly there's something psychic going on with their intelligence, but nevertheless they have to go through a fairly lengthy process to actually reach it. Starting off with nothing but a single spore, it's entirely possible that the Imperium could deal with it before it reaches critical mass. Additionally, the UNSC and Covenant are capable of preventing it from reaching truly galactic proportions. It has been able to wrong foot all factions in Halo before, but if a shotgun can keep a combat form down, then a bolter certainly can as well. This scenario is also more or less likely depending on which world the Flood starts on, of course. Worlds like Hive worlds, while having a much higher amount of people to infect on it, also have a higher chance of attracting the attention of someone with a planet killer. When half of a hive suddenly looks like the worst kind of person at a convention smells like, you're gonna notice. Same goes for if they end up on a Tau world. I don't think the greater good is likely to include the Flood in it. Trying to infect the Craftworld Eldar initially would lead to them being sensed out and Darth Sidious to death most likely. They would probably have a field day with the orcs, to be totally honest with you. While the average boy could certainly take on a combat form, it's the matter of them getting infected. And truth be told, in my opinion, I think the Flood spores are going to be able to outfight the orc spores, or however you want to word that. If I have to explain to you why the Flood wouldn't get anywhere with a tomb world, then please kindly direct your attention to the nearest wall and headbutt it until the neurons in your brain realign themselves. And as for them spawning in a Tyranid-infested planet, honestly, it could go either way. The Flood could doubtlessly absorb slain Tyranid bioforms. I mean, when they're dead, they're just meat. Hell, infecting dead corpses is a valid way of gaining soldiers and biomass/intelligence for a Gravemind as far as the Flood care. But as for living Tyranids, I'll leave that up to whatever you want to think. Maybe the Flood can infect them like any other, maybe the Tyranids can't be infected, maybe they can, but the Tyranids might be able to combat it or adapt to it. Up to you, and your answer to this question determines how likely the Flood can spread in this scenario. And there's always a couple of ways other factions could hinder the Flood at this stage as well. The Flood can't infect demons any more than the Tyranids can eat them, so if this first Flood spore spawns on a planet that's having a chaotic problem, it probably won't end well for the Flood. And if the Flood are really unlucky, the Necrons might catch wind of the Flood spreading on an Imperial world and use that fancy Star Destroyer button they have. System goes supernova before the Flood spreads, Necrons are laughing the whole time. time. Did you know it's more like a galactic yard charmer than a weapon? Neat stuff. Entirely unrelated, but I felt like throwing that in there for you. Now,
In terms of the Necron tier, I think maybe it will be possible for them. I mean, we were just told about a Forerunner AI system that was meant to be the defense general of the entire Forerunner army being corrupted by a Gravemind or a Keymind of the Flood. So I think it's possible. Of course, under the right conditions. You know, there has to be a Keymind or a Gravemind to take or to come into fruition, and from that, maybe it's possible against the Necron tier, somehow, some way to convince them to join their side of things and to fight against, the Flood's enemies. I think it's possible. If the most powerful artificial intelligence created by the Forerunners can be corrupted, then who's to say the Necron tier can't suffer the same fate?
for scenario 2, the Flood are able to become another faction in Warhammer, not stomping but not advancing much like everyone else in the setting. Now this one I'll go ahead and say is the least likely in my opinion, but for the fun of it, I'll talk about the situation. Much the same as the first, but there's no intelligent and or trigger-happy Inquisitor around to blow the Flood-infested planet to Kingdom Come. The Flood takes over the world and begins spreading across the local sector. Fleets are dispatched to halt the spread and eliminate the threat, but the Imperium underestimates the capabilities of the Flood. Each regiment sent to combat them just ends up joining their ranks. And as the Flood grows more in numbers, its intelligence rises in equal measure. Tactics of those sent to face it are memorized and dealt with as they come up anew. Eventually, a slew of planets are firmly under Flood control, infested beyond repair and never to be reclaimed. However, in the scenario, the Flood comes to a halt after an initial surge of growth. Once the Imperium and other races of the galaxy become accustomed to the threat, they learn a few key things. 1. For the love of God, eliminate any ships with Flood on them that are inbound. Security is going to need to be tightened to hell and back, and you better get used to shooting ships coming out of Flood-contested systems on sight, but it can theoretically be done. 2. If they land on a world, devote every bit of resources you have to eliminating them, assuming you can't just blow it up. There is no threat higher than a Flood infestation on a planet, and if they show up, you need to eliminate that entire area. Even in Halo 3, when the UNSC was down to pretty much just Earth, they were willing to let half of Africa get glass because the Flood was just that much of a risk. 3. If the planet looks like it's going to be a goner, just nuke the entire thing. While it'd be incredibly difficult to manage, it's entirely possible that the Flood would become just another faction in the 40k setting if proper containment is followed. Containment in the traditional sense, of course, not containment in the destroy the entire galaxy with giant hula hoops sense. Funnily enough, this is one of those threats that might cause some of the factions to show some unity with each other. Much like the Tyranids, I see no reason the Tau and Imperium wouldn't work together against the Flood, same with the Eldar. Hell, if it was bad enough, maybe it'd even be like with the War of the Beasts, where Iron Warriors and Imperial Fists fought alongside one another. That'd be wild. Now, I say this is the least likely situation to happen because the Flood in my mind aren't really a threat you can stall like this. You can either get rid of them, or you're getting turned into fungal stew. Since they're not only going to gain numbers and intelligence, but knowledge of whatever they're infecting, as proved by how they could drive vehicles of the Covenant and UNSC no problem, as well as hijack foreigner ships, you'll have a major problem where once they hit critical mass, there's no stopping them. For some reason, Google Docs auto-corrected critical mass to critical ass, which isn't important at all, but it made me chuckle, so I thought I'd let you all know that happened.
Like, why? Oh gosh.
Anyways, this critical mass problem is the same as in any zombie-related media. Granted, most zombies can't clear buildings in a single jump and outmath Isaac Newton, but it's the same problem of after a certain point, the apocalypse is coming by sheer weight of numbers. As for their intelligence, absorbing a million guardsmen might not tell them anything important. They might gain some colorful new words to call the regimental commissar, but that's it. But they still gain the intelligence of all those guardsmen added on top of one another for the Gravemind. Additionally, absorb the right tech priests and they know all about how the weapons they're facing and absorbing work. Absorb the right officer and you've got knowledge of the Imperial tactical and strategic plans for the area at that man's time of death. And do I really need to tell you why a Flood-infected and enhanced Space Marine would be bad news for anyone in a light-year radius? Though,
just imagine what they would look like. Yikes.
For all my talk of this being the most unlikely scenario, this is the one that would be the coolest to put the Flood in as an army in 40k, since they certainly got the potential to be a kick-ass army. Flood pure forms would be fantastic models, and imagine something on tabletop like the Flood carrier form. You said...
What is that? It's like, it just has legs and some sort of balloon on top, like, ew. Okay.
one or two of them into a unit of guardsmen, and if all goes well, you can infect them to your side. Imagine how cool of an army that would be. One that might start off weak, but can absorb the enemy into their side to turn the tide. Imagine the arrogant face of someone who brings a titan to the game board. Now imagine that smug grin being wiped off as a swarm of popcorn models clamber over the thing and infect everyone in it and turn it against them. That would be cool. I don't care if it's unbalanced. It'd be fucking awesome, wouldn't it? Now, scenario 3, the one that is both the situation I think is most likely and the one that is going to once more rear accusations of me being a biased Halo fan. To address that second one first, yes. Now let the jerking off of Halo commence.
This is not your grave, but you are welcome in it.
The Flood begins on a planet and completely devours it. Unlike Scenario 1, the Imperium or Tau or whoever is in charge cannot eradicate the threat, and it begins rapidly spreading across the sector. Aside from them gaining strength in numbers as they grow, the main issue is their assimilation. Everything they assimilate not only gives them that creature's abilities and knowledge, but enhances their strength and agility as well. It's how a standard UNSC Marine that's infected can slap the Master Chief across the map despite him being a goddamn demigod of war. Additionally, them being perfectly able to use the tech of a race they assimilate means that if you don't eliminate the Flood with an army you send after them, they're going to know how to deal with you after the fact. The Flood hive mind begins as a proto-gravemind, a largely defenseless blob creature. That being said, once one of these things are formed, the Flood vastly increases in intelligence and it will undoubtedly make itself impossible to reach, or at least as close to impossible as it can, therefore ensuring the Flood's intellectual capabilities rise alongside their physical ones. As for how a single Flood spore can grow to take over a whole species, it's the same way as every zombie thing ever, their exponential growth. 1 begets 2, begets 4, begets a whole fucking lot more. I think the Imperium's massive scale would screw them over in this case, in both the large scale and the small scale. In the small scale, I mean that literally in the case of all the big shit that they build. Imagine a single Flood spore getting into a knight. With just a single infection form or airborne spore, the Flood have a death machine. Now scale that up to a Titan Legion. Much like Nurgle and the Tyranids to some extent, they create a biosphere to spread themselves with. It even looks like a Nurglite Chaos infection, funnily enough. All sick and gross and nasty ass looking. So any
Yes, I agree.
Guardsmen deployed to a Flood-infested world might just find themselves feeding the Gravemind. The Flood also have their own pure forms that are more than capable of holding their own in a fight. You've got Stalkers, the ranged things they turn into that shoot needles at you, the Flood tank, and of course the Flood Juggernaut. It was cut from Halo 2, and that's probably for the best because beating that thing on Legendary would make me cry. The Boulevard of Jackal snipers is already bad enough, but in terms of Warhammer, this thing is more of a damn dreadnought. It's the size of one and it hits like one. On top of all the other crap they got from Halo Wars 2, I mean, look at these things. Ugh. Just to go a bit more into their infectious capabilities I mentioned earlier, it's important to remember that Foreigner AIs are fully sentient artificial people, at least in terms of how advanced they are. If the Flood can infect those, I see no reason the Flood would have any issues infecting machine spirits once it devotes effort to it. They might not even need to infect the pilot of a Knight or Titan, for instance, just its machine spirit. And if nothing else, part of the reason Medican Bias was corrupted by the Flood is because the Keymind convinced him to turn against the Forerunners. Some machine spirits are pretty damn close to just being AI if they aren't already, and the Flood mind is so goddamn charismatic that it can convince them to betray the Imperium.
And that would be the biggest nightmare for the Mechanicus of Mars and also for the Imperium of Man. It will just be the biggest nightmare. It will be the Iron Man 2.0 essentially, you know? Yeah. Or the Men of Iron. Sorry, not Iron Man. The Men of Iron. Yeah.
But naturally being helped by a healthy dose of corruption. And if you're thinking that something like this might take a while, remember the Flood are capable of infecting space-time itself. Even if it were to be the case that the Keymind has to individually talk to every single Titan spirit for years on end, that's not as much of a problem when the year-long conversation takes place over the course of about 5 minutes. And depending on how prevalent machine spirits truly are, the Imperium is even more fucked. A lot of what the Imperium calls machine spirits are actually just something like programs and stuff like a computer nowadays, so that's not that big of an issue. The Flood can probably infect it with the ye olde computer virus and make it not work, but that's just a single piece of equipment not working. Oh well. But if the other end of that scale is true, and AI is truly a part of almost every major piece of Imperial equipment, the Flood may very well kickstart a second Men of Iron rebellion. And as far as things like servitors go, they can just infect those the old-fashioned way of popcorn ball to the spinal column. That's a computer and a person infected all at once. Just eat the guy plugged into the battleship's navigation system, and you've not only got yourself a pilot, you know how to pilot every other ship of its type. As the Flood infest more more and more of space, they only become more and more powerful. There's no spreading themselves out too thin here. Much like the Tyranids, the Flood hive mind can be directing an entire battlefield all at once. However, it's much harder to disrupt the Keymind's presence amongst the Flood. There's far less in the way of synapse creatures amongst the Flood, so you can't just shoot the big one and the Flood all turn into mindless beasts. At best, you can destroy the Gravemind overseeing the Flood, but there's a couple of problems with that. Problem 1, the Gravemind doesn't even need to be on the same planet to direct the Flood, and a Keymind undoubtedly has an even larger range as well. Problem 2, the Gravemind is minimum the size of a damn Titan. Some things I've read say its body might be hundreds of kilometers large, and if that's the case, nothing short of an orbital bombardment is killing that thing. Either way, you're gonna need some big guns to kill it. Problem 3,
you'll need a planet cracker, not just big bombs. A weapon that can crack that planet like an egg, you know. That's what you need to do. Because just bombing the planet or glassing the planet is just not enough. You need to crack it. It needs to become boulders in space. That's what you need to do.
it's not just a giant blob. A proto-Gravemind is, but a Gravemind proper isn't, and in this scenario, the Flood are long past the stage of proto-Gravemind. A Gravemind, meanwhile, can launch things across space if it needs to. As in, pick up a Flood combat form, stuff it in a fleshy drop pod, and just catapult that bitch across the solar system. It does it in Halo 3 pretty frequently in the last level. Aside from that meaning that it can theoretically spread infections across the system it's in without even needing to send any proper Flood combat forms there's the much more direct issue of if it can do that, anything that tries to fight it is going to be turned into a Dark Souls bloodstain real goddamn quickly. Good luck fat rolling around this thing. As for the larger scale working against the Imperium, the Flood absorb their enemies as they do. The problem this poses for the Imperium is that there's a whole lot of people to infect, and as I keep saying, everyone infected is another Imperial that's now working against it. It's kind of like how in the World War Z book, China kept throwing men at zombies, not knowing that every time they lost a man, they gained a zombie to fight. Or rather, not really caring, which I doubt the Imperium would either, given that it's the Imperium. Hell, if the Flood begins somewhere in the Ghoul Stars or another region of space uncharted to the Imperium, it might grow to critical mass, and then suddenly entire swaths of Imperial space are under attack by the parasite. Additionally, the Flood are more than capable of figuring out how to repurpose equipment to suit itself, and in the case of 40k, there is a lot of hive worlds, forge worlds, and more that can be taken over to produce armaments and ships for the Flood. Once the know-how of doing this is figured out by the hive mind, it's endless supplies of stuff for the Flood to produce to help their war effort. War effort, never-ending buffet, same difference, you know? And something I think is pretty neat is that I think it's likely the Flood will produce the exact same issue as a Tyranid Hive Fleet invasion, the Shadow of the Warp. It is, after all, a massively complex and overreaching intelligence stretching across time and space. Who's to say that the Flood can do the same thing as the Nids in this case? Albeit against the Flood, the Psychers go insane because some asshole won't stop speaking in iambic pentameter at them every time they try to use magic. No matter what the Imperium throws at the Flood, in this scenario it can't be stopped. World after world falls to it until they have devoured the majority of the Imperium, and mankind's fate is sealed along with the rest of the galaxy. The ever-present orcs will only present more food and soldiers for the Flood. The schemes of the Eldar are no match for the intelligence of the Keymind. Clearly, the Tau will survive and repopulate the galaxy, and I can't even finish this joke. They get stomped. Straightforward. Space and time itself will begin to corrupt itself into a living hell, potentially preventing demons from manifesting in real space. This same issue will also plague the Tyranids. If space and time are absolutely Smeckledorf, then the Tyranids' travel across the galaxy can be splintered and disrupted enough to make them easy pickings. Regardless, as industrial centers fall and armies are infected, the Flood will have more than enough manpower to handle Tyranid hive fleets. Kamara and the Black Library likely won't even be safe, as the moment a Webway Gate is found, it's time to go ballistic with the Flood spores. Even the forces of chaos will be forced to bow to the unending tide of the parasite pouring across the galaxy, with cultists and marines being infected and turned while demons are gunned down by their former servants. As for the endgame, the Flood will begin to finish with the rest of the holdouts amongst the galaxy. Depending on how powerful the Flood's absorption really is, there's a very real chance they might develop Psyker powers, in which case the precursors as
That's amazing. If that actually happens, that would be amazing. Imagine a Flood spore with Psyker abilities. Yay, that would be crazy.
they were are back now, just a lot grosser. You may say that being the god that he is, the Emperor could handle the Flood, and individually, of course, that's true. There's no Flood form that'll manage to harm him. But as a god, he is weakened as his worshippers die off. And as the Flood consumes more and more, not only will he lose worshippers that deprive him of power, which to note is the same issue the Chaos Gods will face, he will also receive less and less Psychers to empower him. The daily dose of Psychers he needs to sustain himself will dwindle from the thousands, to the hundreds, to the dozens, to finally none. The end of the Imperium in this scenario may not not come from a flood invasion of Terra, but a warp storm as he finally dies and chaos overtakes the cradle of man.
Nah, that's not cool enough. No, there needs to be a big shebang battle on Earth. Okay, that's that's what will make this so amazing and cool. To read about or to watch, not the Emperor dying a slow, whimper death. No. It has to be a big battle. Yeah.
As for the Necrons, you might think they'll be the inheritors of the galaxy, as robotic beings should be relatively safe, but this won't be so. The average Necron warrior could potentially be infected by the Flood's logic plagues they use to infect the machinery of other races. Even disregarding that, the Flood aren't just predators like the Tyranids, they're hateful, they want an unending hell of subjugation for all life. And the Necrons, while not technically alive anymore, are not likely to be spared the wrath of the insane remnants of the Precursors. As the Flood takes over the industrial centers of other realms, it will turn them towards the Necrons to eliminate them. It will learn the secrets of the Necrons' ultimate weapons and turn them against not only them, but the Catan, some of the only beings capable of threatening them that in their sharded state will be easy pickings for a massed Flood invasion. As the last of the mortal beings in the galaxy are consumed, on multiple levels it becomes an unrecognizable hell. Not only are infected planets turned into flood worlds covered in their biomass, but space and time itself warp beyond recognition. The library in the Forerunner trilogy mentions that looking at the stars, they looked off somehow. Whatever the Flood were doing as they were wiping out the Forerunners, they were causing the galaxy to become wrong on a fundamental level. However they managed to do it, the end result is the galaxy becoming something closer to hell than anything we would know. Physics are entirely rewritten, much like how their star roads could rewrite reality to change their mass, and life may very well become impossible. Any chaotic incursions attempting to combat the Flood are dealt with easily, either by the unending tide of combat forms banishing them back to the warp, or because once in real space demons need to at least somewhat follow the laws of physics, the Flood can simply rewrite these laws to be to their advantage. The Eye of Terror will more than likely end up closed, as will the Great Rift, whether that be due to the Flood being able to build something similar to the Necron pylons, or the sheer psychic weight of the Flood hive mind shutting it down like the Tyranid shadow in the warp. Either way, the end result is the same. As the last of their followers and mortal beings they draw sustenance from are infected, the Chaos Gods begin to wither and fade. The 40k galaxy is subsumed into the Flood. It may have taken another 40,000 years from the days of the Human Covenant War, and 140,000 years from when they nearly consumed the galaxy the first time around, but their victory is inevitable.
Yes, the victory is inevitable. There's no stopping them. I'm just thinking about an escape plan for humanity, people getting on board ships and getting the hell out of this galaxy. Because now the warp and the Chaos Guards and the demons and everything else that is within the warp is weakened. I'm sure it will be safer for people to now actually leave the galaxy altogether, on colony ships or any type of vessel that has got faster than light technology. Just get out of the galaxy. Go to the Andromeda galaxy. It's the closest galaxy from our galaxy. So yeah, let this galaxy be consumed and yeah, bye-bye. There's nothing you guys can do here. There's absolutely nothing you guys can do here. Just get out of the galaxy. We don't have the Ecumenes Halo rings to activate in this galaxy. We don't have anything like that here. Oh well, the Necron tier do have some sort of weapon that can destroy entire solar systems, if I'm not mistaken. I forgot what they call it. Something array or something. I can't remember. But, there's a holographic projection of the galaxy. They're able to zoom in on whatever star system they want to destroy and just flick at it, and that star will just blow up. So, yes, the Necron tier do have some sort of super weapon that they could use against the Flood. But it might not be enough as well. Yeah, because the Flood is going to be spreading across the galaxy quite fast, I think. So yeah, I don't think that weapon will be the silver bullet that saves the galaxy. But essentially, what I've been saying before, that, the only way for humanity to survive is to get out the galaxy. Yeah. This galaxy is doomed. In the third scenario. Yeah, in the third scenario. The second and the first scenario, we were able to contain them, we were able to have some victories against them, and they became a faction within the Warhammer 40k Galaxy. But in the third scenario, it's just bad all around, no solutions to the problem. So run away. Run away. That's all you can do.
We exist together now. Two corpses in one grave.
And with that, I am done with the 3 HaloHammer videos. I do hope you've all enjoyed the video series, as it was very fun to write and make. As I've said many a time, I love me some Halo. And even if you hated it, well, you can always make fun of me elsewhere on the internet, or in the comment section. I don't advise that one for your sake, because it'll just boost me in the algorithm and keep my garbage opinions I hate so much floating around, but if you really want to let me know how unbelievably stupid I am for these videos, then go for it. Don't think I'm done with Halo yet, of course. There's all sorts of lore videos about them I'd love to make. Between this series and the one about the Human Covenant War, it's been proven to me that people will watch it. I think next time I dive into Halo, we'll take a look at your friendly neighborhood office of naval intelligence. They do some shit the Imperium would say is too much, but that'll be sometime in the future. This was quite the long video, as you can probably tell, so I'll be taking a break from Halo for now. Not for too long, of course, but long enough to get back to what you expect from a Warhammer channel. You know, Warhammer, and maybe some stuff about a phone company, if I have time. Thank you as always to my wonderful channel members. You are the random person to my flood infection form. I don't know how I can turn this into anything resembling complimentary, so use your imagination. But in all seriousness, thanks. For the first time in a while, I'm excited for what the new year will bring, and that wouldn't be the case without all of you watching my crap. Thanks for watching, and take care out there. Alright, now hear me out. Gravemind, right? Big scary monster, hateful and manipulative beyond belief, wants nothing more than to consume all life in the galaxy. I bet, and again, hear me out, he gives the sloppiest toppy in the universe. Absolute mad head game, that good old Gluck Gluck 3000. You might say that's bad. I say that's probably not even the top 5 most shameful things I've said on this channel. I know.
Stop.
Know what can make that list though? Gravemind Dussy. Nah, I can do better than that. Fladussy. Wait. Precussy.
Hey. Okay. Yeah, guys, that is it. Yeah, that is it with the Flood could Devour the 40k Galaxy HaloHammer Part 3 made on the PancreasNoWork YouTube channel. Yes, PancreasNoWork YouTube channel. Yeah, this is the final part, the precursors, who then turn into the Flood. Yeah, how the precursors were defeated by the Ecumene is still up in the air. We're not entirely sure really what happened, how did it happen, how did they achieve victory. But, you know, from their victory came this calamity in terms of the Halo. In terms of the Flood, sorry. And the Flood really are an extremely adaptable species of hive mind intelligence, and definitely they cannot be underestimated. What they're able to do, how they're able to do it, and the different variants of Flood species, if I can say that, you know, also very potent and dangerous to any living being. Even cybernetic beings like the Necrontyr are not safe. Definitely there is no way, no chance for this galaxy, no chance for the Warhammer 40k Galaxy to survive. Because the first 2 scenarios made by PancreasNoWork, I don't really agree with them. You know, I think the third option or the third scenario is far more believable. This galaxy is going to be devoured by the Flood. I just don't see, you know, any way for the Imperium of Man to have a proper defense against something like this, because we know the incompetency of the Imperium of Man in terms of governors of different planets, military officers, the organization of the military. It takes years for information to get to the proper authorities, and then, you know, there's a proper force that's going to investigate whatever situation occurs throughout the galaxy. It takes years for something like that to get organized and to be dispatched. And even with the warp, you don't have a complete guarantee that you're going to arrive at your destination. So in those years, as the Imperium of Man is gathering their forces, the Flood is just going to continue spreading from one planet to the next, to the next, to the next, and it's just going to be an uncontrollable situation for the Imperium of Man. And all the other Xeno races as well, I just don't see them making it out of this alive, you know. The craft worlds of the Elder will be infected one by one, you know, as refugees from one craft world goes to the next craft world. One of them might be having the flood spores in them, and it will just continue to spread in that situation there with the Elder. With the Orcs, like PancreasNoWork just stated, that yes, the Orcs are going to have a lot of fun, but it will be at the it will be a situation where there is no victory for them. You know, this war is not going to be like other wars. There's no party. It's just going to be consumption of biomass by the Flood, and they're going to win. They will win eventually over them. And the not the Elder, who are the blue people again? I forgot what their names are. The Tau, yes. The Tau also, I just don't see them getting out of this alive, really. And with the few star systems that they have and the territory that they control, you know, the Flood is just going to consume them extremely fast. With the Imperium of Man, it will take time because, you know, they control majority of the stars in the galaxy. So it will take time with the Imperium of Man. But with the Elder, the Tau, and maybe also the Necrontyr, whichever planet has a tomb, you know, system of caverns underground, yeah, it's going to be very fast for them to take over those planets and to take over, you know, those Xeno races. And yeah, really, I think the only thing I can see as a glory moment for the Imperium of Man is if they have their last battle on Earth. Have the last battle on Earth or in the solar system against the Flood, you know. They might win the first war or the first battle against the Flood, but as more and more flood spores and flood ships come into the solar system, it's going to be over for them as well. But at least, you know, we'll have one hurrah before the end. Yeah, I don't want the Emperor to die a silent and boring death, and just because there's no more psychers feeding him the energy to sustain himself. You know, that is just going to be very boring. That's going to be very, very boring. The Emperor has to go out with a bang. You know, the entire solar system, Mars, Earth, go out with a bang. You know, fight them till there's nothing left of you guys. You know, then that will be a happy ending for Warhammer 40k, really. And anyone who's like on the outer edges of the galaxy, escape, run away from this galaxy, because I think this will be the only opportunity for you guys to do it. You know, the warp won't be as chaotic as it used to be because there's no more, you know, trillions of human beings across the galaxy feeding their emotions into, or projecting their emotions into the warp. So I think the warp is going to be extremely calm. The Chaos Guards and the demons, you know, they'll also be extremely weak. They won't be able to manifest themselves in the Materium. So this is your chance. This is your chance to get out the galaxy, leave the galaxy, never return, go somewhere else, and pray that the Flood do not reach that destination. Yeah, that's all I can say. That's the only solution. Run away. Yeah. But this was interesting, really. The HaloHammer series, from part 1 to part 3, really, it was good in terms of the Covenant, the Ecumene or the Forerunners, and the Precursors. I still don't know what the Precursors name. Yeah, you know, the name of the species. What are they called? I need to know about that. I think I'll just search that on Google. But yeah, it was really interesting, you know, having the backgrounds of these 3 different factions or groups or races, and you know how they would operate in the Warhammer 40k Galaxy. Definitely with the Covenant, they would become a faction in the Galaxy. With the Ecumene, they will control the Galaxy, no doubt. However, they will have conflict with the Chaos Gods. I do see that as a possibility there. Yes, they will control the Galaxy, but the Chaos Gods are still going to be here, and you know they're gonna tussle with the Forerunners. And then in terms of the Flood, it's total defeat. No one is gonna make it out of this alive. The Flood will control this Galaxy, definitely. Yeah. This is nice. This was nice, really. Guys, if you guys want to check out the original video as well as PancreasNoWork YouTube channel, the links are going to be in the description below. If you like my reaction, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Okay? Good night.